And you made me think about this idea of stories that we tell ourselves about what we can and can't do, which is also a testament to the powers of meditation and how you can start to undo and rewire, you know, that process. I mean, I even said it to you in some form or another, that I've always told myself a story that I can't do endurance-based sports, and that is always predicated on my success with more anaerobic sports, right? And I do believe there is a reality out there where if I really put my intentions to it. I mean, I've had the runner's high before. I get it. I do get it. I've had that peek behind the curtain. I understand that no mind you've been talking about. So I see the attractiveness of that. Or I mean, the cycling I could maybe do. I could get into the cycling, the long distance cycling. I think.
Oh, that's the fun one.
Yeah. I could get.
Well, it's
into
got
that.
gear too.
Yeah, and you're moving a bit quicker, and a nice environment. If you're a nice, you know, I don't know, landscape or something like that, I think there's attractive elements to it. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that you really have to be careful about the stories that you tell yourself, because not only do you cut yourself off from the experience, but you limit yourself in other facets of your life, and it all starts with that story. And if you actually realize it, and you do almost like a reverse engineering of, well, where did that thought actually come from, this idea? You'll find it's from some obscure memory when you were a teenager, and once you had a bad experience that wasn't even really valid, you're remembering the memory wrong. And it's almost heartbreaking. It's almost heartbreaking because it cuts you off from so many other experiences, and it limits your potential as a human being to grow in these different areas. And nobody wants to be around those kinds of people anyway. I mean, I'm sure you maybe have friends or maybe ex-friends that, you know, you go and suggest something. Oh, well, let's go and do a hike on the weekend. Yeah, let's go out into the mountains, just do a hike. And then hate hiking, just don't like hiking, never good at hiking, right? You're never friends with those kinds of people anymore, you know, because they just tell themselves stupid stories.
You know, I've often wondered why, because one of my tasks is to not be frustrated with people like that, because I get so frustrated. And the reason is because I feel like fundamentally they don't understand their own life.
Yes. And it breaks your heart.
I don't know if there's it breaks your heart. I remember I've had encounters with friends who, I remember one time I can't remember what the instance was, but I phrased it. I was like, you find a knife in every gift that God gives you.
Yeah.
Somehow you finagle, like you're given, I don't know, like a gift, and you find a way for it to be a curse.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do about that. You know what I mean? Other than be who I am and live my life well. But there's a really interesting switch that needs to happen. And I think the best way to say it is the acceptance piece of accepting reality as it actually is, which is that it is always changing, right? That's one thing I've noticed too, that, and this is just in my experience, but a deep resistance to change, to changing narratives, to changing your mindset, changing environments, right? That one tends to lead people to that everything is a curse place. And another one, and now these are two poles of the same problem, right? That there's everything is change, and that also, paradoxically, there are things that never change, right? And the people who can't handle that, right, have the opposite problem, which is it's the chaos and order conundrum. They fall too far in order and too far into chaos, right? But that people who can walk that middle line of being like, I think it's probably responsibility, but it's who accept that they have complete responsibility and have zero control over the universe. If you can walk that line and pair those two, you are indomitable.
Yeah.
in my experience. The people who can truly win in any circumstance are the people who take full responsibility and accommodate for the mystery, right?
I think that's the most exciting way to live. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
100%.
they call that the I've got it here actually. They call that the Tao. Call that the Tao,
Yeah.
walking in the middle.
Yes,
Yeah.
dude.
So you got the order
Love it.
here, you've got the chaos in this side, and those who can have the most wonderful, transformative, the most interesting lives are the individuals that can walk between that path of, again, taking responsibility, which is the order sides of things, but also
Yeah.
being open to the fact there are some situations. I like to call it maybe not chaos, but like serendipity, like synchronicity, these things that you just can't,
Mm.
you can't find a rational explanation. It's like when you bump into a friend that you haven't seen for like 5 years, right? And
Yeah.
they say, oh, I'm just on the way to do like such and such. And you've got a plan for your day, right? And they're getting in the way of
Yes.
your plan.
Yeah.
And they're saying, why don't you come? We haven't seen each other. Let's go have a drink together. But I've got a schedule to do. And then it's
Yeah.
that kind of fight there, which is a
Yep.
very interesting phenomenon that's happened to me many times. But I've always found that if you let go, if you relax into that moment, you'll find that that's the perfect place to be. I wanted to ask you just on that point, for those individuals
Hmm.
who it almost feels like the individuals you described there, who always feel, I suppose, victim mentality might be a way to describe, or a very deterministic way on
Hmm.
viewing the world, and that, you know, they really have no
Yeah.
control over it, and you feel like you're looking into their life. They're like a glass orb, and you're just on
Yeah.
the outside, and you're going, just dude, come out and play. Stop doing that. Is there a
Yeah.
way? Because this is something that I've struggled with. Is there a way to get them to that place where
Hmm.
they better understand the, I suppose, the creative powers they have over their life, and not fall prey to fate, let's call it?
Yeah.
Or is it
Yeah.
just something that they
This is
have
a
to
good
do,
question.
and work out on their own? I I
Hmm.
I don't know. I'll tell you my piece. Again, a pretty deep question, but I'm just wondering, because
Yeah.
it comes from a place of compassion, you know, but some people just can't
Yeah.
seem to break through to that other side.
Yeah. I think it's different for each person. I don't know if
Mm,
there's any real, there are probably some overarching themes, but one thing I always reframe with people is whenever they say something about victimhood, about if they're getting in there, right, in the victimhood type, because that's how we describe it, right? They're in the
yeah,
victim mentality. And I'm like, I actually don't think that's productive. They're the hero of a false reality.
right.
They're not victims. They're the hero because actually, fundamentally, we are all heroes. I don't think anybody truly can see themselves as a true victim. I don't know if that's even possible, because even the people who are in that role, they're in that role because they believe. I don't think that we can, like, let's put it this way, I don't think that we cannot walk the hero's path. We just finagle the reality to fit the hero's path so that it allows us to express our maladaptive behaviors, right? Does this make
Mm,
sense?
yeah,
So for example, um, uh, they'll butt against your optimism, right? And they'll kind of get you in the optimism. Well,
yeah,
you know you're gonna, you will die,
yeah,
like that kind of thing. It's nihilism,
yeah.
mumbo jumbo at you, right? And you're like, yeah, uh-huh. That's the first. That's like a baby learning to walk. That's step one. Yeah. So you're stuck there, and
Mm,
you're like, oh, I'm the hero because I know the truth, which is that we will die. But there's more to that. So actually, there's more to the story. I think that's the main thing. So if I have one piece of advice for dealing with people when they're in that victimhood, I would say the main area you can focus on is helping them see that there is more to the story. Because I think fundamentally,
mm,
suicidal behavior is, Peterson speaks perfectly to this. Suicidal behavior it comes from a belief that I know everything there is to know, right?
right, yeah,
Right.
So,
I know everything. But the
mm,
reality is, and anytime you run into victims, like people who really are caught in those victimhoods, um, you know what I'm speaking to, right? Like not in acute trauma, like just prior to acute trauma, that's a totally different thing. But the enduring chronic mindset difficulty that it disallows them to have relationship, to take care of
sure.
their body,
Yeah.
that they know they're in discord with who they want to be and they still can't break it. I think the helping them see that there's more to the story is one thing. And I think the way that I've had success doing that, because it's very challenging, it comes from cognitive psychology. The two tips would be motivational interviewing, right? So that comes from the healthcare field and addiction therapy.
Mm,
And then the other one that I would recommend is cognitive behavioral therapy. Both of those do a similar thing, which is it's essentially it's Socratic questioning
mm-hmm.
systematized. So basically, you're asking people to, you're not telling them because telling doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Yeah, no, no,
It just
no
doesn't.
way this is gonna work.
It's like, now I'm more resolute.
Yeah.
Um, Asking, right? So describe to me. So like, let's say, yeah, well, you know you're going to die, right? Yeah, I know. Tell me about dying.
Mm,
Tell me about it. Well, it's the end. Cool. So how do you know that?
mm,
Well, there's nothing after it. Was there nothing before you were born? Like, well, I guess, and what
mm,
you do is you point out that what you think is absolute might actually just be your opinion or
mm,
something. And a lot of times people don't come to these conclusions maliciously. Not always. Sometimes people do. But most people just arrive at these conclusions that they just don't serve them and they can't even see them.
yeah.
So that's something I like to recommend for people in business too, is that you do the same thing in business. Most businesses die for dumb reasons,
Mm,
really dumb reasons. Because if you can just identify, well, there's a piece of my narrative that just isn't serving me, you just take it out and get rid of it and put the correct behavior in there, you're going to get the correct output, right?
mm-hmm.
So that's the way that I like to reframe that too, because victimhood is prevalent in business.
It's pervasive. It is. It is.
Pervasive.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And no, I really agree. I do think. I mean, you preface it nicely in that, of course, there's every case is unique in that way, and I think reframing is certainly something that I lean into when dealing with those kinds of personalities, and the methods that you suggested there, I think are very, very powerful. I think I do a similar kind of way. I definitely, and that's what I was going to say, and I'm glad you said that, is definitely do not tell this person, why their thinking was wrong and why your thinking is better, because that seems to further cement their beliefs if, you try to attack them. But it's more a consequence, I believe, of trying to get them to understand why they've come to their particular thought conclusions. If somebody has a
Yeah.
belief about something, you go, oh, it's interesting. Why do you think that? And then you start to kind of unravel it, and then you get to the root of it, and you realize that this whole narrative, this whole story that they've told themselves about the reason they can never get a girlfriend is just based on some bullshit that
Yeah.
that they once had once a girl looked at them funny. Like,
That's
honestly,
all
it
it
comes
takes.
down to small
Yep.
trite interactions that maybe lasted a second, and you built 25% of your personality on something which is rubbish. And
Yep.
that's why it makes it so frustrating. But I really think, though, that part of it is just people's own personal karma. And as much as you
Mm.
have compassion and love for people, you can't help them get to that realization with them maybe get into a dark place, maybe get into the
Yeah.
bottom of the barrel, and
Yeah.
crawling themselves out of it. And it's hard. It's really difficult.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that was a heavy question I threw at you at the end
This is a super good question, dude. I would say too, the other thing that it reminds me of is for me to learn these lessons, I had to be abandoned.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a way you can do it without being abandoned, but there may come a time for those people where you say, I can't parlay with that energy anymore. And that
Yeah.
might be kindness. And you need to know,
Yeah.
you need to
Yeah.
walk that line very carefully.
I
Right?
think that's a great way to describe it, is that is the
Yeah.
kindness. That is the kindness. Because sometimes you can actually do too much for somebody, and you don't want to appease them to the point where they have this warped understanding of how reality works, because that ends up hurting people. And
Totally.
you know, the most loving and compassionate thing to do is to give somebody, you know, the truth in that respect, and you know, hopefully they can find their way out at the end. But yeah,
Yeah.
super difficult. And I think maybe ending on a solution and a lighter note to kind of end our conclusion. I really believe it all ties back to mindfulness, presence, regardless of the tool, whether it's fasting, whether it's meditation, whether it's cold exposure. I always give people the exact same advice if they're in that situation. It's just get present, get here, be here now, and you'll realize actually this is the perfect place for you to be.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah.
Until you truly can understand that, things change. And by the way, before you're on your ivory tower here, I learned that lesson in a mental hospital, and everything got better from there. So I had to find that dark place myself.